But what is the message? Well, let's ask our Editor-in-Chief, Rowan Dean. Rowan, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you, Gideon?
Very well. Now, this is a special Easter weekend edition of CounterCulture. You have written a special Easter message to Spectator Australia subscribers. Now, you made the point that there are a lot of things we can learn about Easter, even those of us who aren't Christian, like myself. I'm obviously not a Christian, but it is my inheritance as a citizen of the Western world to enjoy some of these cultural staples of Christianity, not least of all Easter. So what message can all of us take from the Easter long weekend?
Gideon, what I was looking at was basically traditionally Easter, whether you're a pagan going back pre-Christian times, or whether you're a Christian, the period of this is the most optimistic period of the year, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere where it's springtime. You've got the rebirth of the environment, of nature, and obviously femininity. All these things are celebrated in traditional Easter or even pagan festivals from this time. It's a period of optimism, of rebirth, which is terrific. In the Southern Hemisphere, it obviously doesn't have the springtime connotations, but it is the kind of last flush of summer. It's a lovely time of year in the Southern Hemisphere as well. So I was just looking at how politically you can take those themes of rebirth, of optimism, and apply them. And in particular, what has coincided with this Easter was the end of the COVID restrictions. Whoops, suddenly, just as we were getting into the Easter weekend, everyone's thrilled. There's this wonderful sense of optimism. In New South Wales, you wouldn't really know that COVID exists. Life is as it was over a year ago. And, it's an exciting period of time. But politically, I'm afraid it's quite the opposite. And if Scott Morrison is hoping for some kind of rebirth or, new flowering of his popularity, I'm afraid the decisions he took this week don't live up to that, and aren't going to supply it.
Well, you're right about New South Wales. Now, Gladys Berejiklian has not been, a conservative warrior historically, but geez, on COVID, I find myself looking at her with the same loving admiration that I imagine a lot of Victorian hipsters do when they look at Dan. So the sooner we get her to Canberra, the better. Our federal government desperately needs somebody like Gladys Berejiklian. But look, on these lockdowns, let's be honest. Are you surprised that we're back here? Are you really surprised? I'm not.
I'm not surprised, but the tragedy of it all is the pointlessness, the futility, and the utter waste of human resources. Horrible expression, but lives, jobs, livelihoods, lifestyles that are just being trashed by the state premiers for no reason whatsoever. Nowhere in the world, Gideon, has it been shown that lockdowns do anything to prevent the spread of COVID. Nowhere in the world. In fact, often the evidence is the contrary, and you compare places, states in America where they've had severe lockdowns to states in America where they've had very few, and there's no difference in the ultimate, or very little different in the ultimate outtake. So why we are doing this again is a tragedy beyond belief. The Labor premiers of Queensland, Victoria, and West Australia, people will look back in future years and go, you cruel, cruel people, what you have done, destroying every hope of revitalising the tourism trade this weekend in Queensland, of people's sanity, of people's ability to enjoy making a crust and getting on with their lives. These people have trashed it. And if you look at the kind of cost-benefit analysis, no one does a cost-benefit analysis of what all these restrictions are entailing. And for minimal, virtually zero loss of life, going back months, we are doing the most extraordinary things to damage people's lives and livelihoods. It's awful.
As always, our heart on this show goes out to the thousands of businesses affected, the thousands of people whose livelihoods have been interrupted yet again, the many people who were counting on that influx of Easter tourism, and to see that all ruined yet again is frankly just utterly heartbreaking and makes us all very despondent. Now, look, you've also touched on another disastrous week for Scott Morrison. This women's issue is like quicksand. The more he is moving, the more he is being drawn into it. He's announced triumphantly a Prime Minister for Women. Can we just have a Prime Minister for Conservatives, for Australians, for Australian patriots? How about we start there and then we have a Prime Minister for all the other identity groups?
Well, you're 100% correct, Gideon. If you're going to have a Prime Minister for women, you have to have a Prime Minister for the vertically challenged, a Prime Minister for whatever identity group steps forward. It's an idiotic idea. He did correct it and then go on to say, well, I meant a primary minister, but that didn't really wash. The problem is, Scott Morrison, as you said, quicksand is the best analogy. You cannot win if you play identity politics. You will never, ever win. There is no satiating the beast of identity politics. So the more you feed it, the more it will demand. This was a real tragedy for the Liberal Party, for the coalition. This was the week Scott Morrison basically abandoned all sense of any kind of centre-right or conservative principles and just went hollis-bollis in with the craziness of identity politics and hoping that somehow putting a bunch of Sheilas in place will solve problems that his supposedly talented team of ministers were incapable of solving. This is insane. People elect their representatives based on who they want. They expect their representatives to be treated on merit, not on genitalia. It's a disaster.
And even when you do have talented women being appointed into the ministry, like Amanda Stoker, who is one of the best people in our parliament, well,
Absolutely.
The Identity Politics Brigade is raining down hell on her because she's the wrong kind of woman with the wrong kind of opinions. So that just shows how transparent and idiotic the whole spectacle has become. Now, on a completely different matter, it's ALP National Conference Week, and of course, for the 5th year in a row, or whatever it is, the ALP are forgetting about Australia's problems and focusing on a pretend country, which is the non-existent state of Palestine. So what are your views on the ALP's national conference and their fixation on this issue?
Gideon, we've seen in Labor UK, for example, as well as other places, that when the left start toying with these sorts of issues, they actually it is often a case of camouflaging anti-Zionism or even anti-Semitism. And so you play with the Palestinian, you play the Palestinian game at your peril. Let's not forget, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and certainly Hamas in Gaza are virtually, or in fact, terrorist organizations that don't hold free elections, that terrorize their own people to maintain power.
Correct.
Donald Trump wisely avoided the Palestinian issue altogether and successfully managed several peace treaties between Israel and Arab states, something everyone said could never be done. Labor are completely either clueless or deliberately avoiding recognizing that fact. And by encouraging the Palestinians as they are to go for statehood, they are encouraging automatically the death of innocent Jewish people, because that is how the Palestinians have responded in the past. Now, there were sensible propositions, Gideon, put up by Michael Danby, David Bliss and others, terrific members of the Labor Party, saying, well, hang on, if you're going to recognize Palestine, make sure these various elements are in place, including guaranteeing Israel's security, guaranteeing even Israel's right to exist. And yet Penny Wong and the Labor Party threw that lot out. So you really have to question what their underlying motive is, and you have to question why they are so ignorant or willfully ignorant of the ways the Palestinian authorities behave, and whether they genuinely believe that this is a solution to those problems.
Well, the good news on the Israel front, I guess, is that it looks like Benjamin Netanyahu may very well be re-elected yet again, the best leader that the Jewish people have had since Moses, in my humble opinion, speaking with some authority on the matter. So whatever the Labor Party says and does, there's still a strong man at the helm who is capable of protecting Israel and protecting its right to exist, even if the Australian Labor Party will not. Anyway, to you, Rowan, have a great long weekend. Thanks for all the hard work you've done on this excellent edition of the Spectator Australia. Looking forward to catching up again.
See you, mate. Have a great Easter.
Cheers, mate.